Dream Come True, a Miraculous Ladybug Fanfiction, written and narrated by Christina Cheng. Cat Noir barely noticed the sting of the cold night air as he landed dejectedly through his bedroom window, his tear-stained face as numb as his heart felt. Closet. Adrian shoved aside a few t-shirts and old pizza boxes from the couch as he sank heavily into the cushions and wearily took in his surroundings. He and Plag had really let the place get out of shape. Ever since his father digitized him and started having secret meetings with Mrs. Tsurugi for the Alliance project, it was almost as if Adrian had become invisible. Or worse, obsolete. His father had never really spent time with him before, but he'd still needed Adrian to perform certain tasks, make special appearances, and maintain a rigorous schedule that controlled almost every aspect of his day. Now, his father didn't seem to care what he did. At first, Adrian had been surprised and delighted by his father's sudden lenience, granting every request without a moment's hesitation and excusing him without a second thought. Adrian knew he should be happy, since his new freedom allowed him to see his friends more, and it was a relief not to keep up with his father's strict expectations. But the more he was left to himself, the more completely lost he felt. He had kept up his studies, and Plag had tried to entertain him as best he could. He made cheese sculptures, played card games, and often splurged on formally denied food orders, leading to many eating contests and later stomach aches. They even pulled out every piece of clothing from his closets, since Adrian could wear whatever he wanted now, in an attempt to help him find a new look. But nothing felt right, and the only result was a jumble of clothes being mixed into the growing clutter of his room, along with a few new additions to Plag's treasured stinky sock pile. Adrian rolled onto his back to take his mind off the mess, and as he did, his hand scraped lightly against the game controller that had been carelessly tossed aside, causing him to reflect on a time that now felt so far away. Adrian had been trapped in a shifting cycle of losing his mind and dully accepting his fate, spacing out between a blurred stream of school activities and video games to the point where he almost didn't feel like himself anymore. And then, everything changed. He was called away on a mission, his one comfort throughout all the uncertainties, and was suddenly transported to a world where everything felt so right. Adrian closed his eyes, reveling in the memory. After so much time of struggling and waiting, they'd finally defeated Monarch, putting an end to his evil reign of terror and making Paris once again a city of love and peace. He remembered the joyful shouts as the city cheered their names and thanks as he overlooked them from the tower, standing by his lady's side. And oh, his lady. The amazing, beautiful, smart, clever girl who'd finally become his. His lips lifted in pleasure as a hint of a smile grew on his face, but it quickly crumbled, cut short by the choke strain of holding back the sudden burst of a sob that threatened to break out of his chest. The painful ache in his lungs pressing tightly, stabbing through him like a knife to the heart. They had been so happy. Instead of growing more distant as he had feared, Ladybug had actually wanted to be closer to him, in a way they never could with the threat of Monarch around. To celebrate their victory, Ladybug agreed to go to the movies with him, and there they shared their first real kiss and made a promise to be together no matter what. In what seemed like no time at all, they were married, standing together hand in hand at the front of the church, waving as all their friends stood by cheering them on. Adrian still remembered his lady's graceful shyness as the crowd faded away, her head turned slightly to the ground, shoulders tensing upwards as she glanced timidly back at him. "Are you sure you want this? That you want me?" The words were soft, with a hint of wonder, as a mixture of remorse and uncertainty played across her features. She smiled apologetically, giving him a half-shrug as if to dismiss what she'd said, and moved a step away, but he quickly turned her back to face him, gently squeezing her fingers between his as he replied earnestly, "Milady, I've never been more sure of anything in all my life. And I know for a fact that Plag has 57 wheels of cheese stashed in my room," he added, lifting his eyebrow pointedly. She giggled, the worried doubtfulness on her face washing away in an instant, replaced by a radiant, contented glow. He stared lovingly down at her, His eyes caught in hers as he lightly brushed a strand of hair away from her face. "Are you sure this is what you want, milady?" he asked softly, a seriousness growing in his voice as he let his hand fall to his side, his eyes gazing searchingly into hers. "After all this time, do you really love me?" The fear that flickered through his heart for an instant was immediately lost in a flood of love and acceptance as Ladybug rose on her tiptoes and quickly closed the gap that had been between them, tenderly pulling him close and filling him with a sense of complete belonging. "I've always loved you," she whispered. "I just didn't know it. I've always loved you." The words echoed over and over throughout his head, every moment they spent together making him feel more true and precious. Love filled everything they did, added color to boring days, strengthened them through hard times, and united them when new forces of evil would arise. Every day was a new adventure, and Adrian felt more alive than ever before. But when there weren't giant clocks to defeat, and looking back, every obstacle had been a clock, they had simply spent their days together, free from troubles and expectations, allowed to be themselves and cherish every moment in the other's presence. It felt like years had gone by, a blissful string of moonlit walks and carriage rides, soon filled with the additional presence of strollers and baby carriers as their little family grew and Adrian's heart swelled bigger than he ever thought possible. Each little wonder in their little red and black cat-eared suit, a perfect blend of his lady and him, all smiling back at him with charming little cheeks and his lady's sparkling blue eyes. And his lady, every moment with her made his heart want to sing. She was the picture of beauty and grace, wisdom and cleverness highlighting every action she took, and yet she was also shy and playful, and looked to him for direction and support. He loved hearing her laugh or seeing the rosy blush that danced across her cheeks whenever he gave her a compliment. He loved holding her close as they watched the clouds drift above them and treasured the feeling of her head tucked into his side. Their lively discussions about which hamster to get, followed by hugs and kisses, mixed with long walks and the cries and coos of babies, all melted together in the continuing fullness of a peaceful and happy life. Every day beginning with the whispers of his beloved wife as she ran her fingers softly through his hair. "I love you." But it had all been a lie. It was a lie. The words echoed through his head as Adrian angrily shook himself from the memory and bolted to a sitting position before swiftly pacing around the room. He shouldn't even be thinking about those memories. They weren't real. It was all fake. The more he thought about it, the more angry he was with himself for believing it. Plastic baby dolls? Fake. Flying alarm clocks? Fake. Ladybug in love with him? Of course that was fake. She told him dozens of times that she was in love with someone else. It was all fake. A horrible trick to make them give up their miraculouses, and yet Ladybug had said she didn't want it to end either. Adrian stopped in his tracks, the clouded swirl of anger and frustration suddenly dissipating from his mind. In the dream, although the environment had been constructed, it felt completely real because they were both still in control of their own thoughts and actions, albeit influenced by the fake reality presented before them. He'd almost dared to hope that her feelings for him had changed, and perhaps the magic of the miraculous had recognized the true desires of her heart, enabling her to do the same. There was him she loved, and all those times of pain and heartache could be behind them, just as it had been in the dream. But no, it was just like before. When he asked, she had said Monarch had probably altered it somehow in an attempt to weaken them and steal their miraculouses. It was probably true. Monarch did know of the so-called love between them, and Cat Noir had made his feelings for Ladybug very well known. He wanted to kick himself for his own foolishness and lamented his over-enthusiastic, inconsiderate pursuit of Ladybug, which had undoubtedly drawn them further into this mess. A sudden chill ran down his spine as he was hit with a heightened awareness of the reality they were now in. Monarch was still out there, taking advantage of innocent people, with every miraculous except their own making more powerful than ever. He was just waiting for them to make a mistake. One slip up and it was all over. This wasn't a game anymore. Not that it ever really had been, but in the past it had been easier to charge past the dangers and rely on Ladybug to hold things together. Now he knew his lady was just as uncertain and vulnerable as he was, and fighting these upgraded villains would be harder than ever now that they were once again on their own. His lady. Who was he kidding? Sure, she didn't mind when he called her that, but that just confused him all the more. Ugh, how could he ever focus on being the partner she needed when all I could think about was winning her to himself? Flag eyed him wearily from where he hovered above Adrian's bed, munching a wedge of camembert as he watched Adrian pace back and forth across the room. You're not okay, are you, kid? Adrian whirled around to face him, throwing his arms out desperately. I was married to her, Flag. To Ladybug, the girl of my dreams. I could hug and kiss her whenever we wanted, and she loved me back. How am I supposed to go back to normal after getting a glimpse of that? Why would the dream be for us both? Why would she go along with it if she didn't really love me? Please, Flag, you have to help me. I feel so confused. My heart aches, and I don't know if I'll be able to handle this. We had children together, Alia, Marinette exclaimed, pausing mid-stride as she came to a pointed stop in front of her best friend, who raised an eyebrow skeptically. The doll babies? Well, yes, but they were real to us, Marinette replied defensively as she resumed her pacing, her stride slowing as she became lost in thought, and tucked her arms around herself consolingly. Her voice grew softer as she added, he was so good to them, and at night when everyone cried he would hum lullabies and hold them for hours until they fell asleep. The doll babies cried? Marinette shot a glare at her. Yes. Alia held up her hand submissively. Okay, sorry, just trying to get the whole picture. So let me get this straight. You and Cat Noir were shot with the power of Jubilation, which is supposed to show your greatest desires. Instead of being with Adrian, 3 kids, and a hamster, you ended up married to Cat Noir. Yes, Marinette moaned miserably, burying her face in a pillow as she threw herself dramatically onto the chase. Alia gave her a moment to recollect herself, but Marinette drearily pulled herself into a sitting position, her face still half hidden by the pillow as she clutched it tightly to her chest. Her voice was soft and muffled as she peered around the corner of the pillow, eyes directed miserably toward the floor. It was always hard for me to imagine a life with Cat Noir, but now I picture it so vividly. He was so gentle and sweet, and I feel like a total monster for rejecting him all the time. Alia took a hold of her friend's shoulders, causing Marinette to look up in surprise. You're entitled to your feelings too, Marinette. You can't feel guilty about not being able to help his. Marinette glanced away uneasily. I know, but I don't even know what my feelings are anymore. And that's okay, Alia insisted, giving her friend a reassuring squeeze before letting her arms fall back to her sides. You two don't have to figure it all out at once. There's plenty of time for you to work things out before you have to worry about planning weddings and stuff. Alia wiggled her eyebrows, and Marinette couldn't help chuckling a little. Yeah, I guess we both got a little carried away. Marinette gazed affectionately toward the ground as her thoughts wandered back to her partner, so alike and complimentary of her in countless ways. Her heart froze as a new thought caused her to stiffen fearfully. But what if he falls in love with a different girl in the meantime? Alia shrugged dismissively. Then he wasn't truly in love with you to begin with, and you'll be better off without him. Marinette sent her a wounded look. Sorry, girl, I know it's harsh, but it's true. I don't think you've anything to worry about, though. That boy has been head over heels for you since day one, and he doesn't seem like the type to fall in love half-heartedly. Besides, what about Adrian? Are you really going to say you no longer have feelings for him? Marinette fiddled absently with the pillow in her lap. She avoided her friend's piercing gaze. I don't know. I've been trying to see Adrian as just a friend, and it's too risky to be anything more than that with the threat of Monarch hanging around. And yet, everything about Adrian is so perfect. He's thoughtful, kind, generous, sincere, with such a warm smile and caring eyes, and I can't help but feel all fluttery and delighted whenever I'm around him. Listen to yourself, girl. How can you say you're not in love with him? I exclaimed eagerly, but Marinette just shook her head. With Cat Noir, it was different. Not a heart-fluttery, mind-wobbly kind of love, but a quiet love. A gentle love that was just full of reassurance and security and understanding. A deep trust and rich affection that could last a lifetime. Her voice broke as a flood of memories engulfed her, and Alia quickly pulled her into a hug as Marinette's eyes filled with tears and she fought to hold off sobs.
We were so happy, Alia. But now I don't know if my feelings are just because of the dream or have been there all along.
Tiki slipped quietly over Alia's shoulder and nuzzled her, hold her gently on the cheek. Marinette clung tighter as desperation rose in her heart.
Please help me, Tiki. I don't know what to do.
Marinette took a deep breath as she drew near the entrance of the school and forced herself not to think about twinkling green eyes in a black cat-haired suit. She was Marinette Dupain-cheng, just a normal girl on her way to a very normal day at school. Not the former wife of Cat Noir and mother to their 4 o'clock children. What was wrong with her? She tightened her fists around her backpack and mentally clung to the words Alia had assured her of the night before. They had time. She didn't have to figure things out all at once. All she had to do was live her best and take it one day at a time, starting with arriving at class before roll call. She hurried up the steps of the tall, imposing building, feeling as if she had traveled back through time. The familiar faces of fellow students blending around her as her feet seemed to carry her automatically back to her current classroom. The daily angst and bustle of being in high school settled into her like an old acquaintance, becoming a grounding reminder of how very young she still was. Well, if it isn't the loser girl Dupain-cheng. Good morning, Chloe, Marinette said, calmly walking past the taller girl and rolling her eyes with a dry smile. Things were back to normal, all right. Hey, girl, Alia greeted her, offering a friendly fist pump which Marinette readily returned as she slid into her seat. Feeling okay? Marinette smiled with a soft shrug. Yeah, thanks. They both turned their heads to the front as Mrs. Bustier began talking, and it was only then that Marinette realized what had felt so out of place. Hey, where's Adrien? He's never late to class. Alia scanned the empty seat in front of them and gestured to Nino, who merely shrugged. Weird, maybe his dad punished him again, Alia suggested in a low whisper, then dutifully shifted her attention back to the teacher. They were almost an hour into the lesson when a tall boy with blonde hair slipped through the door and quietly made his way to his seat. Adrien, is everything all right? Miss Bustier asked, pausing the lecture as all eyes pointed to the boy in the front. Yes, miss. We ran into some car trouble on the way here that took a while to fix, but everything's fine now. Marinette narrowed her eyes warily as she watched a classmate in front of her pull out his books and begin taking notes. His answer would explain his absence, but it sounded almost rehearsed, and the way he quickly busied himself with his textbooks only strengthened her suspicion. Everything was not fine, and for some reason Adrien was lying about the reason he was late to school. Quietly, so as not to attract attention, Marinette accidentally dropped her pencil into the aisle and caught a glimpse of his face as she leaned over to retrieve it. His normally cheerful expression was replaced with an empty void. Schooled to mimic perfect concentration, yet his eyes were sorrowful and dejected, head tucked tenuously between the weary slump of his shoulders. Marinette's heart ached for him as she settled back into her seat, feeling as if the short distance between them had grown 1,000,000 miles wider. Her mind was still caught in a dreary daze when she realized someone was tugging on her arm and all her books had been cleared off the desk. Marinette, Miss Bustier said the class was to go study in the library now, remember? Alia said meaningfully, gesturing to the open door as the rest of the classroom was quickly emptying out into the hallway. Oh, yeah, sorry, Marinette exclaimed, scrambling to her feet and gratefully taking her book bag from Alia as they joined the others downstairs. By the time they got there, the library was quiet, with little beside the rustling of papers and scattered conversations carried about in hushed tones, as most of the class had already settled into various areas of the large, prestigious room. Do you want me to go find us a table, or? Alia began quietly, but Marinette interrupted her. Actually, I think it'd be better if I studied alone for a while. And besides, I can see Nino already has a seat saved for you. Alia looked over to Nino, who was sitting at a 2-person table and nodding his head invitingly. Okay, but are you sure you don't want me to come along to help you? She glanced around before whispering conspiratorially. Readjust to everything? Marinette shook her head with a smile. I'm pretty sure I remember how to navigate a library, and it's not like I've never written a research paper before. Marinette's heart warmed as she watched a look of hesitation struggling across Alia's face, and fondly threw her arms around the girl, giving her a tight squeeze.
I'll be fine. Go enjoy some study time with your boyfriend. Thanks for being the best BFF ever, she added earnestly. Alia hugged her back before reluctantly stepping away. If you say so, girl. Marinette playfully shooed her away, then stepped into the tall aisles and slowly wove her way between the solemn bookshelves, her eyes flickering half-heartedly across the book titles as she circled her way around the room. Most of the students had found an empty table or a quiet corner to work on their projects, but there was one student in particular that caught her eye. Adrian had his books spread out across the table on the far side of the room and was shifted away from everyone else, barely visible unless one passed a row of interfering bookshelves. Marinette started towards him until she was almost right beside him, but then swiftly drew back and ducked into another row as familiar fears and insecurities rushed in. What if Adrian didn't want anyone to talk to him? Or worse, what if he didn't want her to talk to him? What if she stumbled all over her words and would only make things worse? What if he wanted to deal with his problems alone? What if he didn't have any problems and it was all in her head to begin with? She bit back a quiet scream of frustration and resisted the urge to smash her head against the bookshelf, choosing to peer across a stack of books instead to get another look. He seemed so small, quietly hunched over a long wooden table, with aged lamps casting a dismal glow that seemed to highlight the darkness under his eyes as he sat alone, secluded beneath the towering shelves of wood and metal. Marinette felt her fear subside immediately as it was swept away by the tender ache of compassion, and she knew she had to do something. Taking a deep breath and strengthening her nerves, she moved cautiously over to him. Adrian had one hand propped up under his head, while the other rested passively over the pages, and he appeared to be deep in thought over the text, until she stepped closer and realized the book was upside down. She strolled timidly past the table, hoping to catch his eye, but his head remained face down, pointed toward the book. She paused, lingering at one of the nearby bookshelves, uncertain of what to do. I could accidentally knock over some books. That would definitely get him to notice me. Yeah, but then the rest of the library would notice her too. What was she doing? She should just go over there and ask him how he's doing. With sudden determination, Marinette spun around and marched herself back to the edge of the table, stopping right beside him and laying a gentle hand on his shoulder. Adrian? He looked up in surprise, though his reaction was slower than she expected, and his body relaxed as he recognized her. Oh, hey Marinette, did you need something? A bit of his former warmth returned to his eyes as he turned to face her, though they wandered to the hand she still rested against his shoulder. She blushed slightly, letting her hand fall naturally away, then returned his gaze. I just wanted to check on you. Is something wrong? His face fell and he turned away, sinking slightly lower in his chair. You don't have to tell me anything if you don't want to, Adrian. But I know how much sharing something with a friend can help lift the weight off your shoulders, and I'm here to listen if you think it might help to talk about it. I don't think I can, Adrian mumbled, then looked up with a slight smile. It's nothing against you, Marinette, and I appreciate that you care to check on me. It's just... He trailed off, fiddling with the ring on his finger. Some things are hard to explain, you know? Marinette nodded, then slid into the seat next to him, knowing there was more he wanted to say, but he seemed uncertain of where to begin. Does it have something to do with your father? Adrian stiffened, then gave a small shrug. No, yeah, kinda. Actually, it's a whole lot of things. He ran a hand through his hair and stifled a sigh. You've seen those new alliance rings, right? Marinette made a face. Yeah, my friend was showing me one the other day. That must be super weird for you, having a digital version of yourself that talks to everyone all the time? Adrian sent her a dull smirk and lifted his eyebrows in agreement. Yeah, I'm used to seeing myself all over the place, but hearing my own voice saying whatever people want me to is a little freaky and annoying, particularly when they make me encourage their crazy obsessions. Marinette cocked her head slightly as his voice took on a fonder note at that last point, but his shoulders quickly sank, as if even that small bit of happiness had been too much for him, and her heart ached at the heaviness that weighed in his eyes. I'm sure alliance can be a good thing, and Father says it will help a lot of people, but ever since he and Mrs. Haruki started working on the project, he's been spending even less time with me, and barely cares what I do anymore. He traced his fingers aimlessly against the textbook, his voice growing wistful as his shoulders hunched timidly and he rested his chin against his arms. Vague memories that were becoming strikingly more clear with each passing moment flooded through Marinette's brain. Images of Adrien laughing with Nino, joining their friends on the barge, talking and staying late after school, but also glimpses of him wandering the streets alone, sitting lonesomely in the library, and a shadow over his eyes whenever one of them brought up stories from home. Is that why you've been able to hang out with us more? Because your father was too busy to notice?
Oh, he noticed. I would ask him every time, but Natalie would just send me away saying he had work to do, while Father would give me a dismissive wave of the hand or nod of his head. Adrien sighed quietly. I know it sounds silly to be upset by this. I mean, I basically described every kid's dream. Freedom to do whatever I want with money to spare and no one telling me where to go or what to do. I always thought this was the main thing I wanted. Freedom to make my own choices and a chance to have fun. But now, all I feel is empty. He stared off for a moment, then turned to her hurriedly. Don't get me wrong, I definitely love spending time with you and the others, and I'm truly grateful for everything I have. It's just... No, it makes perfect sense. Marinette cut in hastily, recognizing the cascading feelings of doubt and guilt that had run her into the ground more times than she could count, and she couldn't stand the thought of Adrien suffering the same thing. It does? Adrien slowly tilted his gaze up at her, his eyes hesitant and tinted with a hint of shame. Yet a glint of hope rose in them, and she could almost hear his heart pleading for reassurance. Of course. You have such a good heart, Adrien, and I know you appreciate and take care of everything you have and want to support all your friends. But that doesn't mean you don't need a little support and attention, too. Adrien shrugged shyly, but Marinette could see his chest tighten and breathing become more stilted as his mind struggled to accept her words through the condemning haze he found himself in. She leaned in closer as she went on earnestly. You are one of the kindest, most generous people I know, and you're always looking to see the best in people. But sometimes people make mistakes that have nothing to do with you, and it's okay to be hurt by them. Anyone would be. Her voice hardened slightly as she added, I don't know why your father hasn't been paying attention to you, but I do know there's nothing you could do to be a better son. You've always done everything he asks, which is why it makes total sense that you feel lost without having Mr. Control Freak dictating your every move. Adrien's eyes widened and Marinette's hands flew to her mouth as that last part slipped out, but slowly fell away as Adrien relaxed into a light chuckle. Yeah, he does like to have everything done a certain way. He smiled, and for a moment the affectionate green eyes danced into hers like the light from a sunbeam breaking through the clouds, only be snuffed out and shadowed again as the despondency crept into him once more. My father will never change, but it almost didn't matter. His voice was low yet filled with emotion, and he shot her a look that was filled with so much desperation and sorrow that Marinette felt a shock of pain rush through her as she froze, caught in the intensity of his gaze. I was so lost, Marinette, trapped in a constant state of frustration and hopelessness, and I didn't know how long it could go on. But then something horrible, wonderful happened, and I almost thought everything would be okay. What was it? Marinette whispered, concern filling her head as she stared back into his troubled eyes. Adrien opened his mouth as if to explain, then ducked his head and straightened in his seat again, closing his eyes as he drew in a soft breath. It doesn't really matter now. The worst part is how I let it make me feel. A slight shudder rippled down his spine and he tucked his head before saying quietly, I almost hurt someone really badly yesterday. I was so caught up in my feelings that I almost didn't stop them from taking control of me. Marinette gasped in alarm. You were almost akumatized. Adrien fiddled dejectedly with his fingers. Not exactly, though I'm kind of surprised I wasn't. His voice grew huskier as he added, I've never felt so much loss and pain in all my life. Not even with your mother? Marinette asked gently. Adrien hesitated, then explained. With Mom, it was different. A gradual pain as her health worsened, and then one day she just disappeared entirely. My father still holds on to the hope that one day she'll come back to us somehow. And for a while I did too, until I grew to accept it. But this was different. This was... His hand spread out in front of him as he searched for the right words. This was sudden and devastating and enraging all at once. His fists tightened and he shoved them into his lap, turning to her with a look that was both pleading and filled with agony, his voice growing softer as he added. It was as if you'd been magically granted everything your heart desired. Happiness, a family, love. You spent years building a life for yourself and cherishing every moment of it, only to have every piece cruelly ripped away from you, never to be seen again. Marinette's eyes widened as the story began to seem all too familiar, and her mind instantly supplied the reason for his current distress. Barely above a whisper, she asked, "Were you near the Akuma fight with Darker Owl yesterday?" He froze and seemed about to protest when a thought came to him, and he turned back to her with concern. "Wait, how would you know that unless..." "I was in the area getting paint from my friend Soooo, and..." Marinette's hasty explanation was cut short as she found herself folded into a blanket of warmth as Adrian wrapped his arms around her shoulders and drew her close in a firm yet tender hug. "Oh, Marinette, I'm so sorry. You, of all people, should never feel that kind of pain." Marinette was surprised to find her own throat tightened as the fears and loss of yesterday boiled to the surface. She felt a fresh wave of tears threaten to overwhelm her as she buried her head into the comfort of Adrian's shoulder. She waited for Adrian to pull away and let go, but he didn't, and she felt herself transported back to yesterday, caught in a similar embrace, and finally let her mask of confidence slip. Weeping silently, she was bombarded with wave after wave of fears, insecurities, and grief, her heart aching for her cat-eared partner and the life they'd left behind. "It's so not fair," Adrian muttered, his voice a tight whisper, and Marinette gave him a small squeeze as warm teardrops thudded softly against her jacket. "No, it isn't," she agreed quietly, her voice shaking slightly as she struggled to suppress the weight of more tears. She was about to shift away, feeling she'd imposed on his comfort long enough, but stopped as she felt his grasp tighten ever so slightly, with a gentle reluctance that echoed of a similar moment, plucked from a haze of memories that seemed an eternity ago. "Leaving so soon, my lady?" Ladybug let out a light laugh. "Come on, kitty, someone has to check on the little ones, and we should probably head back to the house soon. I heard it's supposed to rain later." Cat Noir tightened his hold on her, leaning them both back against the picnic blanket as he closed his eyes contentedly. "For the record, I have been checking on the little ones. Super hearing, remember? And they're all happily sound asleep, so hey!" he exclaimed, flincing sharply as Ladybug gave him a playful poke in the ribs. "You just want to be sound asleep too, which we can do at home. We have the perfect setup for a cat nap, remember?" "Yeah, but I have you with me right here, so what more could I possibly want?" Ladybug shook her head with a fond smile as her kitty husband sent her a pleading expression with woefully adorable kitten eyes, and she knew she couldn't say no. "Okay, but just a few more minutes." She snuggled close beside him as she tucked herself back into his shoulder and sighed peacefully as she soaked up his familiar warmth. "Do you ever worry that this is too good to last?" he asked suddenly, a rare seriousness filling his voice as his body stiffened and a hint of worry grew in his eyes. She sat up to view him more clearly, and Cat Noir shifted to sit cross-legged in front of her as he took one of her hands in his. "I mean, I've wanted this for so long, but now that it's finally here, I almost feel it's too perfect to be true." Ladybug's eyes rose with gentle concern. "Something tells me you're not talking about an uninterrupted cat nap." He smiled faintly and rubbed his thumbs in small circles against her hand. "No, I mean us. You in love with me and me in love with you. To spend every day in your presence is a gift in itself, and to know that I belong to you forever and you to me is almost too much to hope for." His eyes lowered apologetically, and his strong frame seemed to fold in on itself. "I don't deserve you, my lady. You're so strong and beautiful and clever. Everything you do is bathed in light and sense and dignity. And me, I'm just..."
Just the most caring and selfless person I know, who saved Paris time and time again, and the guy I love with every inch of my heart. Ladybug interrupted, leaning towards him and using her free hand to gently brush aside the hair over his eyes and slip down to cup his face. Nothing will ever change that, and there's no one I'd rather trust my heart to than you. She pulled away with a sad smile. If anything, I'm the one who doesn't deserve you. I've pushed you away so many times and shouted at you on more occasions than I can count. Not to mention threw you in a trash can once. Her cheeks flushed as she ducked her head with regretful embarrassment, but Cat Noir's cheerful laugh caused her to glance back up as he squeezed her hand reassuringly. I probably had it coming. And you're right. There's no need to worry about the past, since all that matters is who we are right now and what we have together in this moment. Warm leather graced her jaw as he tenderly lifted her chin and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. No matter what happens, milady, you've made my life more wonderful than I could have ever imagined. I love you, Bugaboo.
A comforting pulse flooded her soul as her eyes fluttered open to meet his, and she smiled warmly, tucking a hand against his handsome face. And I love you, my kitty. I know I want you to be my future. And no matter what obstacles stand in our way, I promise to never stop fighting for it. Marinette felt a strange peace wash over her, as she gave a small sigh and felt her shoulders shudder slightly from relief as all the former weight and sorrow lifted in light of the distant memory, and a new hope grew in her heart. She took a deep breath and realized with a dry smile that this was Adrian, a caress she was leaning into. But instead of the old panic and jittery delight, all she felt was calm, wrapped in the comfort of a different embrace, and she gently pulled away from him. Adrian, what if this could be a good thing? He straightened defensively and she hurried to explain. Not the pain associated with it, of course, but what if it showed you what you really want? The things that are important in life. That way you won't waste time on anything frivolous or unfulfilling in the end. You don't just want to be free from the demands and expectations of your father. All those things you dreamed of, happiness, love, a family, those are all things you can have again. He gave her a doubtful smile and lowered his head, but she reached out and touched his arm, causing him to meet her gaze. You deserve all of that, Adrian. And now you know what to look for in your future and where the desires of your heart truly lie. And maybe... She glanced shyly away as her own thoughts filled her head. Maybe now this will give you a reason to chase after it. Adrian stared back at her with an expression of wonder and amazement, mixed with a faltering acceptance, and she squeezed his arm reassuringly. I know the dream still hurts. The loss you experienced must have been unimaginable, and I'm so sorry you had to suffer through that. Even if it wasn't real, the emotions were, and I know it may take time to heal. The good news is it was only a dream, and those are easier to forget than actual events, even if they do become part of your memory. Her hand slipped away as Marinette looked down and went on thoughtfully, half to herself. What matters isn't what happened in your dream. What matters is what you do with the life you're given after you wake up from it. She glanced back at him with a slight smile, and was surprised to see him smiling in return. You're right, Marinette. This doesn't have to be the end of our story. Maybe it's just the beginning. His gaze softened as he added, Thank you, Marinette. You've always been there for me. One thing I know is, whatever future I do have, I hope it's one where I still have you. Marinette tilted her head to soak up the generous rays of sunlight that streamed over her face as she descended the school steps and began the short journey home. Warmth radiated off the concrete and up through her shoes as a warm golden glow enveloped her and bounced cheerily off nearby buildings and street posts. She closed her eyes and breathed in contentedly as she waited for the light to change and her heart filled with hope. You certainly seem a lot more cheerful than you did this morning, Tiki remarked curiously. Marinette smiled blissfully. Oh yes, Tiki, I feel wonderful. Everything is going to be just fine. She took a few steps forward as the light changed and kept her voice low to avoid attention of any passers-by, but her eyes twinkled merrily as she continued. I was so caught up in the life we lost in the dream that I forgot about the life we have right now. It's almost like having a chance to do things over. But now I know. I would still choose him. Tiki's eyes widened. Wait, do you mean Cat Noir? Her voice cut off as Marinette put a warning finger over the Kwame's small mouth and motioned to her mom, who stood inside the bakery, and opened the door to greet her. After a quick exchange, Marinette scurried up to the freedom and privacy of her bedroom and took an excited seat in her desk chair, twirling around in delight. Oh, it's perfect, Tiki, just perfect. Tiki shook herself a bit as she phased out of Marinette's purse and flew to perch on the desk. Cat Noir is everything Adrien is and more. He's kind, thoughtful, sweet, but also brave and funny and tremendously good with kids. Then again, Adrien is too, but that's beside the point. She sprung up with joyous enthusiasm and dreamily lifted her hands to her cheeks before clutching them over her heart. I love him so much, Tiki, and now I think I always have. For a long while, anyway. I just couldn't see it because I was blinded by my crush on Adrien, which was nothing more than a childish fantasy. But this was something I actually experienced, and a future I want to have again. Only this time it'll be real, and we'll do things better, like have my parents actually there for the wedding. She gave a merry laugh before slipping into a seat on her chase as her mind grew lost in a hopeful mix of wishful memories and future possibilities. One thing was certain. A life with Cat Noir was what her heart wanted more than anything or anyone else. He'd always been there for her, through thick and thin, and she trusted and cared for him in a way that was deeper and truer than anything she'd ever known. He was her partner, her best friend, and a future worth fighting for. He was kind, compassionate, courageous, sincere, as well as funny, playful, and charming. What more could she wish for? Adrien sighed deeply as he collapsed into bed and thought back over his day and night before. In that moment, on the roof, he had meant it. He was glad Ladybug was still a part of his life, and that their partnership was something that even Monarch couldn't erase. But his heart still broke when he thought of all they'd almost had together. You know, maybe you should take Pigtail's advice. Aren't you the one who always said if it happened once, it can happen again? Plag offered, hovering beside him with a small chunk of cheese. Adrien shook his head. It was just a dream, Plag. All this time I've been pursuing Ladybug, but that was just a fantasy too. She's already made her feelings perfectly clear. She still needs me, but as her partner, not someone constantly seeking her affection all the time. He breathed deeply as he felt his heart come to peace with that and rested his hands behind his head. Marinette was right. I have to focus on a real-life future, one where my dream might actually come true. He felt a strange warmth fill his cheeks as he thought of his time spent with Marinette. The concern and kindness in her eyes as she listened to his struggles, the sympathy in her cries, how gently she had held him, and the tenderly reassuring wisp of her touch on his arm. She was so kind and sweet, timid yet strong, and her generous wisdom never ceased to amaze him. Marinette was so special. Everything she did was filled with love and concern, creatively solving problems and compassionately listening to his mistakes, all while encouraging him to be better and caring for who he was deep down despite all the scars and rough edges inside. She read his heart like no one could, and a peace inside him grew as he remembered the gracious understanding in her eyes. She was remarkable, a talented seamstress and master of words. If there was anyone who could possibly mend the pieces of his tattered heart, it could only be Marinette. He felt a gentle smile lift across his face as he buried himself deeper into the nest of his covers. Maybe the dream had opened his eyes to what was in front of him all along. A magical girl with a beautiful heart. Whatever his future may bring, he knew it would be nothing short of wonderful as long as she was a part of it. I still can't believe you turned me down as Ladybug. Marinette muttered playfully through a smile as they waved goodbye to the last of their guests from where they stood on the steps of a large church, waiting for everyone to leave so they could head to the reception her parents were hosting. Adrien held up his hands defensively, looking unfairly handsome in his tailor-made suit. That's because I just made the heroically difficult decision to stop pursuing your affections, especially since I just realized how much the enchantingly delightful Marinette meant to me. What was I supposed to do? Besides, he added, tucking an arm around her waist and leaning his head against hers, if I hadn't done that, you would never have let yourself fall for Adrien all over again. Marinette blushed profusely, leaning into his embrace as she relented with a chuckle. I guess it did all work out for the best. Adrien stared down at his lovely bride as she thoughtfully twisted the wedding band around her finger. Having second thoughts again, my love, he murmured, tenderly stroking a piece of her hair aside, just as he had all those years before. Only this time his heart was as solid as a chest beneath stone. He knew without a doubt that she loved him, and his heart fluttered wildly at the thought. After all this time, so many obstacles, misunderstandings, and disappointments, she still chose him. Marinette, his lady, the wonderful woman who had captured his heart and soul time and time again, was finally truly his, and he loved her all the more because of it. She knew him, all of him, completely, yet she still followed him anyway. Quietly and secretly at first, as their friendship had been shy and her love timid, but grew bolder and stronger as time passed, and a trust and companionship built between them until it blossomed into something deeper and grander, filled with peace and comfort that beat back all other evils, and filled with a promise and security that would last a lifetime. Her love for him was as powerful as his was for her. But after so much bustle and stress, the chaos and permanence of a wedding could take a toll on anyone. And he wanted to make sure his little wife had all the reassurance he had to offer. To his surprise, though, she merely laughed and raised an eyebrow as her eyes sparkled with teasing delight. Are you kidding? I've been dreaming of this moment since I was 14. And besides, she added, a light blush filling her cheeks as she glanced up at him and tenderly slipped her arms behind his neck, I already know you'll make a perfect husband and father. Adrien chuckled softly as he leaned his head against hers and drew her close. Did my human ears deceive me, or was that a cat pun I just heard, milady? Well, I had to let you know I loved you somehow. Adrien smiled as her eyes stared lovingly into his, and he affectionately traced a hand along her cheek. I think I might know of another way. Slowly, gently, he leaned closer and felt his heart surge with blissful happiness as she drew him to herself and... Bzzz, bzzz. No! Adrien awoke with a start, his mind swirling in panic as visions of ecstasy faded, and his heart pounded rapidly as he struggled to control his fearful gasps for air. No, this couldn't be happening. Not again. Not again, please. A sob rose to his throat as the ache in his chest widened, but was immediately soothed by a gentle hand on his arm. It's just the baby monitor, which means Hugo's probably awake, unless the cat knocked it over again. A voice murmured low and sweet behind his ear, and Adrien breathed a sigh of relief as he turned to face her. There was a twinkle of a smile in her eyes as they reflected the moonlight sifting through the curtains, but it quickly faded as she furrowed her brow in concern. Adrien, are you okay? Is something wrong? Without a word, Adrien pulled her to himself, wrapping her in the tenderest, tightest hug he could manage as he buried his face in her shoulder. Oh, Marinette, everything is just right. She sat stunned for a moment, then quickly slipped her arms around him, gently running her fingers along his back in a comforting fashion. Was it a nightmare? She asked softly, and Adrien shuddered slightly, knowing they were both all too familiar with those. But he smiled sheepishly as he pulled away and carefully took her hand between his. No, it was more like a memory of the day I got my heart's desire, and when I woke up I thought you'd lost it all again. Adrien nodded as his fingers grazed over the sparkling wedding band that glittered on the hand between his. Like it was too good to be real. Marinette smiled as she leaned over and kissed the tip of his nose. Didn't that feel real? Adrien chuckled lightly and was about to kiss her back when a wailing scream came through the small device near the bedstand, and they both sighed wearily. Does that seem real too? Marinette added teasingly, a dry smile playing across her face as she moved to get out of bed. Adrien caught her wrist with a smile. I'll get him. You've lost enough sleep as it is, and I don't mind. Marinette hesitated, then gratefully tucked herself back under the covers. Okay, but only if you're sure. Are you kidding? 3 kids, a house, a hamster. I just woke up to the best reality ever. Not to mention," he added, placing a soft kiss against her cheek, "my precious wife, who I love with all my heart and makes every day a dream come true." She smiled sleepily, her eyelids fluttering open again as a look of peaceful contentment filled her face. "I love you too, Adrian." He squeezed her hand lightly, then slipped off the bed and into his furry kitten slippers before tiptoeing quietly out of the room. Adrian smiled at the soft fuzz that tickled around his feet as he made his way down the hallway and past the picture frame that captured the lovely Christmas where Marinette and the kids had made and given them to him. A persistent cry from the nursery reminded him of his mission, and he quickly fixed up a bottle in the kitchen before hurrying to the darkened bedroom where the screaming baby lay. "Hey, little guy, you hungry? Daddy brought something for you." Carefully, he scooped up the tiny bundle and tucked him gently into his arm, and the room was soon filled with a peaceful silence as the baby happily chugged down the bottle and Adrian rocked them softly back and forth. Hugo gave a contented sigh as he finished eating, but the wide blue eyes made it clear he wasn't ready to go back to sleep just yet. "Wanna go check on Louis and Emma?" Adrian asked in a playful whisper, his eyes twinkling secretively as he and his little companion tiptoed down the hall and peered into a nearby bedroom. He couldn't help but smile at the complete contrast that greeted him as he glanced around the room. Emma's side was tidily arranged in rows of dressers and cubbies, with little touches of decorative taste and artistic design placed here and there, every stuffed animal lovingly set up with care, and her blanket still tucked beneath her little chin. Whereas Louis took after his mother, sprawled haphazardly from the covers with piles of toys and books spread all around him in a whirlwind of creativity and chaos, though he still had his stuffed plague sock clenched protectively in his fist, and his ruffled blonde curls were carefully brushed to the side from where Marinette had smoothed them away earlier. They could each get their own bedroom soon enough, but they'd wanted to keep each other company, and Adrian didn't have the heart to separate them just yet, especially having longed for the same thing when he was younger. Noticing the gentle snores coming from between his arms, Adrian quietly closed the door and headed back to the nursery, only to chuckle softly as Hugo stiffened at the feeling of being put down, and his eyes flashed open as he let out a cry of protest. "Okay, buddy, I wasn't done holding you yet either." Adrian shifted back to a standing position and lightly bounced the baby up and down as he hummed and patted across the little one's back, relishing the feeling of his little wonder snuggling up closer into him and appreciating just how amazing it was that this wonderful life could really be his. "Hey, Plag," he whispered, knowing the Kwame was perched in a cabinet to the right of the crib and undoubtedly watching this whole exchange. Despite the frequent crying, Plag had taken a special liking to the newest member of the Agrest family, and would often keep a protective eye over the little one or curl up on his chest with a reassuring purr until they both fell asleep. Plag popped up with suspiciously swollen-looking cheeks before gulping something down and glancing at Adrian questioningly. "What? Want to hear something really cheesy?" Plag rolled his eyes and moaned in annoyance. "Oh no, please spare me. Your version of cheesy is as mushy and ridiculous as cheese sprayed from a can." "But then you'll never know about the wonderful truth I discovered." Adrian's eyes twinkled, knowing the Kwame's cat-like curiosity would get the better of him. Plag sighed wearily. "Fine, what is it?" "Remember that time Ladybug and I got shot with the power of Jubilation?" Plag squinted warily. "Yeah? Well, now I know dreams really can come true." Adrian held back a laugh as the Kwame dove into a pillow to muffle his scream of exasperation, but stopped as Plag flew back up and faced him with a definitively mischievous look. "Didn't you have 4 kids in the dream?" Adrian blinked, then tilted his head, trying to remember. "I don't..." His eyes widened until they nearly bugged out of his face and stared at Plag, who was grinning smugly. "I'd get started on picking out another name if I were you," the Kwame teased in a sing-songy manner. Adrian gaped at him, then glanced back at Hugo and tried to imagine what another little addition might look like, before shaking his head with an affectionate smile. "Well, whatever happens, I know I wouldn't trade this life for anything in the world." He leaned over the crib and gently tucked the sleeping baby back into the blankets, before turning inquisitively back to the dark shape that hovered beside him and shifted uncertainly. "Still, you don't really think..." Plag Flag shot him a knowing look, and Adrian's gaze widened as he scurried back to his room, exclaiming, "Marinette?" The Kwame of Destruction chuckled gleefully as his holder all but raced out of the room. "Flag, you shouldn't have done that. You know she wanted to tell him herself." A red being popped up beside him, and Flag shrugged as he avoided Tiki's disapproving glare. "Aw, come on, Sugar Cube. This is Marinette we're talking about. We both know she'd wait forever for the perfect moment until he figured it out himself. And besides, this was way funnier." Tiki shook her head before giving in reluctantly. "Well, I guess it won't really make a difference, as long as they don't let you give the child a cheesy name like Roquefort or something." Flag held his chin with mock thoughtfulness. That does have a nice ring to it. Though I was thinking if it's a girl, we could name her something classy, like Bree." Tiki sighed, though her frown was tinted with fondness as she stated, "You're impossible." "You say that about dreams, too, yet here we are." Tiki smiled as they both floated up to sneak a peek over the tiny crib. "Here indeed." Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And thank you also for all your patience, because this took a long time to finish. It was technically finished like 2 months ago, but it took me forever to actually get around to recording it, because it's just never quiet here, and then I also had a cold again, which destroyed my voice, and I've barely made it through this without coughing. But it is finally finished, and I'm so happy to finally be able to show it to you, because it's probably one of my favorites yet. If you haven't noticed, I'm kind of still mentally stuck in Jubilation, so this was a really satisfying way to, I don't know, develop it more. I guess I felt like in the show that should have been way more impactful, and it kind of was, but they didn't really expand on it at all. So, hey, that's what fanfiction is for. So anyway, thank you for taking the time to listen to this out of your day. I hope it makes you smile. And if you're wondering, this lovely fan artwork is done by my amazing friend Shika, who also writes fanfiction and is incredibly good at it. There's no words to describe how she needs to actually write books, because she's amazing. But anyway, if you want to check her out, I'll leave a link to her in the description. And yeah, I hope you have a great day. Bye.